Hello and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to your second HTML tutorial in this series. I'm excited to continue teaching you HTML, and I hope you enjoy what's to follow. So let's dive in. So I wanted to show you a quick little tip here. If you have already created a folder, say like I've created HTML Tut2. If you've created that anywhere, if you go into that folder and you come up here, this is in Windows 10, but if you click up here and you want to open a command prompt, you do CMD. It's going to open your command prompt in that path, right? So you can see that we're in HTML Tut2. And then if you followed the last tutorial and you downloaded Visual Studio Code, to open up this location in Visual Studio Code, you can just type code space period, hit enter. And as you can see, it has opened up Visual Studio Code. Right, and you are indeed in that directory. So we're inside of Visual Studio here, Visual Studio Code. We're inside of that directory that I just showed you how to get into. We're going to go ahead and create an index.html file. So if you type in index.html, hit enter. By the way, click up here. There's new file, new folder. You can refresh the Explorer, or you can collapse the folders in the Explorer. But anyways, if you click new file and you type in index.html, you'll be good to go. Okay, so if you remember from last tutorial, I introduced you to the doc type. So if we go doc type, and it doesn't matter, it can be uppercase or lowercase, it doesn't matter. So doc type, we're going to do HTML, and we'll close that off. Now notice how this tag does not require this at the end, right? You can just end it off just like that. It doesn't require this either, the end tag. I believe I covered that in the last tutorial, but we're going to go ahead and cover some more in relation to that. Last tutorial I introduced you to HTML tag as well that follows. There's an extra little attribute, is what you call these, that you should add to this for validation purposes, and it's called the lang attribute. And this just lets the browser know what language the document's going to be written for, basically. Okay, and you notice how, like I said, Visual Studio Code always adds that end tag, right? So after that, let's do our head tag. And again, we'll do title. And we're just going to call this my second HTML tutorial, something like that. Whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and go into the body tag here. So we'll add that. Again, it adds the end tag for you. Something we didn't cover in the last tutorial is not all tags require an end tag. Okay, so we're going to go over some of the ones that do not. There is the HR element, and there's two ways that you can end this off. You can either do this, which is the old way of doing it, or in HTML5 you can just do this. It does not require, as you can tell, it's not trying to add that. It doesn't require this end tag right here. Okay, it only requires this. This is called the horizontal rule. And to show you what that looks like, let's open up the page. So we're going to do this. I'm going to say hello, and we're going to do our favorite hello world thing. We'll say world. Okay. So this HR, we're going to see what that looks like here. So let's go ahead and open this up. So if you notice here, we have hello up here. This is our div, and this is the second div, and the HR has formed a horizontal rule across the page. Okay, so there's your horizontal rule. Let's minimize that and minimize this. Okay, so your horizontal rule doesn't require an end tag. There's also another one called the BR tag. The BR tag is your line break tag. So if I were to take this line break tag and I were to put it in here and just repeat, we're going to say hello world, hello. All right. Let's open this back up. And I'm going to go ahead and pull that screen back into focus here for you guys. Sorry about that. I'm going to reload this. As you can tell here, we've said hello world hello, and if you notice that the hello is on a different line, that is because of the line break that we put in. So if we actually come back in here and we take this away, and I'm going to save that, by the way, by Control S. That's how I save so quickly. You can come up here and hit save, but the quick way to do it is to hit Control S at the same time for those of you who don't know. Alright, so let's go ahead and do Control R here, or click this button for refresh. And as you can tell, hello jumped up here right alongside of world, because we don't have that line break in there. Okay, so that's that. So there's another tag called the image tag, and it also does not require a closing tag. So for now, we're just going to do this. We're going to do a little trickery here, and I will explain this to you guys later. You'll learn all about relative and absolute file paths, because they're very important. For now, we're going to go ahead and create a folder. So if you come up here to this new folder, type in, let's just say images. Okay. We're going to go ahead and add an image to this. We're going to say, well, I'm just going to drag one into there. So you can take any image you want from your File Explorer and just drag it into here. I'm going to drag the HTML5 logo into here. Alright. And to get this to display in the image, we're going to go ahead and just go, say, /images, HTML5 display PNG. And we'll save that. If we go back here to our page, we have inserted the HTML5 image into our web page. So there are many other tags that we're going to be covering throughout the HTML series here that do not require end tags. And as we go, as we come upon those, I will make sure to let you know that it doesn't require the end tag. So let's talk about attributes, because we didn't really cover those. So when you create an HTML element like so, it's often going to have some sort of attribute that you need to provide. And in this case, it is source. Up here, it was lang. Up here, it was HTML. These are called attributes to your HTML element. So one that you should always add inside of an image for accessibility purposes is alt. So if you add alt, you would just want to describe the image. So in this case, we'll just say HTML5 logo. Okay, so the attributes are always provided as the name of the attribute, the equal sign, quotations. And I have always used double quotations. I'm pretty sure that single quotations work as well. Let's go ahead and check it out. So if we add single quotations to this, get rid of that other one. And we save, we come back in here and we refresh, it indeed does work. Right. But try to be consistent. If you use single quotations in one area, use single quotations everywhere in your HTML elements. Okay, so that wraps up that. With regard to end tags, let's move on to some other elements here. So I believe in the PowerPoint in the previous tutorial I covered some heading tags. So you have your H1 tag, right? Let's go ahead and actually let's move this up here. So we're going to work with our hello world hello. We're going to say H1 hello, right? So H1, again, it automatically adds your end tag. It's one of those that requires that. You don't want to go like this ever. It might show up still because some browsers are smart enough to understand, but you just want to make a habit of making sure that you get that end tag. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's pull this last div out, and then we're going to come up here and we're going to do H2 because it's heading 2, hello world. We can do H3 and we'll say hello, hello world hello. And why don't we just continue on and do H4, H5, and H6. Let's say HTML tutorial 2. And we'll save this. And if we come back down here and we refresh this, you can see we have H1 here, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. It gets progressively smaller as you go up in heading size. It's kind of backwards. Alright, the next tag is, how about a paragraph? So, in Visual Studio Code, by the way, this has something to do with that Zen code I mentioned in the first tutorial that I'd rather you not look into yet. You can, of course, if you want to. There's nothing stopping you. But to get good at writing HTML first, I recommend you don't use Zen code yet. However, when you're trying to enter filler text in like a paragraph, for instance, in Visual Studio Code it comes preloaded with Zen code or Emmet, and you can type lorem and just hit tab, and it will autofill your text into your paragraph for you. So there, we have somewhat of a paragraph here. We can do it again to get it longer. And I recommend not letting your paragraph run off the page like that. Do a line break somewhere. And you don't have to put the BR tag in. You just drop it down. This is just for visibility in your IDE. So let's break this up a bit so we can read it better. Put it on these even lines here. I will save it. Go into here. We'll refresh the page. And boom, here is your paragraph on the page. Okay, so the P tag, paragraph. Now let's dive into a used and abused element of HTML, the table element. So if we come back into here, after this image, we're just going to keep going down the page because it really doesn't matter in this case. We're going to go ahead and drop a table element in. Now, back in the early days of HTML, browsers struggled to implement CSS standards. So developers eager to create nice websites with good layouts, they turned to tables, the HTML element tables for the layouts. I came into the coding world right as table layouts were seemingly on their way out. It was being taught that it was a bad practice because in HTML 4.01 they specifically stated that tables should not be used for layout. So a table looks like this. We start out with the table element here. You specify a border attribute. That's typically not required. The default is no border, but you can also specify. Let's say you wanted a border, you would put 1. So it's a true or false value. In programming, false is 0 and true is 1. Okay. Don't worry about this styling here. I will definitely teach you that later. These are CSS styles. They're called Inline Styles. I only put these in here to kind of demonstrate how they used to use tables to set up a layout. Okay, so what they would do is they'd get their table element, and after table, you can do a T head element like this. We're not going to worry about that for now. We're just going to go right into T body. So we do T body, okay, table body, and then TR for table row. So if you think of a table, you have rows and you have columns, right? So every TD symbolizes a column. So say call 1, call 2, right? And in our table, we're going to go ahead and actually show the border. So we're going to say border 1. I'm going to save that. And we'll come in here into our HTML page and refresh. Oh, come on, refresh. And if we come down here, you can see I have a small little table, call 1, call 2. Let me go ahead and make that a little bigger. So there's two ways you can make a table bigger, is either through CSS or you can use its width attribute. I'm going to say width, and we're just going to say 400 pixels, 400 px. Or actually, I don't think you need the px, I'm sorry. 400 is just going to know that you mean pixels. So there's a 400 pixel table, and both of these table cells take up 50% of the entire width, because there's two of them. So tables are used for displaying data. You do not want to use them as a layout for your page. So let's get back to this. I'm going to show you how they used to lay out. Oops, sorry. Now let's have a look at the divs layout. So if we pop over here, you can see I've set all this up pretty much the same. And let's go ahead and pull the border out of here. I'm just going to do that in the editor here, or sorry, the dev tools. Remove the border. So if we remove the border from the table and we switch over, you can see it's pretty much the same. There's a little bit of difference, because you got to make some little tweaks to the styling. So if we open up our divs demonstration, or sorry, our divs file, you can see that I created the div version of this. It's a bit more concise. It's not as complex. You're not having to remember what's R1, C1, R1, all those things, right? It's much more simple. So the drawbacks to using tables, it mixes presentational data within your page content and can get very confusing from a web developer standpoint. Having to remember exactly where you nested one table within another, or explaining to another web developer later down the road exactly how your tables are laid out, could prove challenging. Tables are inflexible with different screen sizes and resolutions and could cause the site with a table layout to be very rigid. It'll look very unprofessional. Tables are also not good for search engine optimization, and we can talk about that later, but basically Google has written an algorithm that crawls the web indexing websites, and it's based off of keywords. So these keywords, it doesn't crawl like your entire site. It will look for the first thing that catches its attention, like your links on the top of your page, for instance, or the content that you provided. Tables make it more difficult for them to do that efficiently, because typically the table layout has the navigation on the left-hand side of the page, to where Google crawlers are expecting your links and navigation to be at the top of your page. That's how it kind of affects search engine optimization. So in place of tables, HTML in combination with CSS is much easier to put your search engine important content more towards the top of your page, making it more crawlable. So another reason for not using tables in your layouts would be because they're not good for different screen sizes and screen resolutions. They're very inflexible. In fact, on the project that I'm currently on, we were using a table to display data. We weren't using it as a layout. We ran into this problem where it wasn't responsive enough, so we had to move to an alternative approach. Tables can be very finicky when it comes to setting paddings and margins and such like that, because they are display table and not display block. But we'll go ahead and get into that later as well. So if we come back to our table here that we created earlier, there's a few more things that I want to show you. And we'll get even more in depth if we decide we need a table later on. But for now, I added another table row, and I added just one cell in that table row. We'll just say row 2, call 1. All right, so let's look at this and how it will look. So we look here, notice that there's 2 columns up top, right? We went down to the second row and we created only 1 column. Well, we're missing a column. So there's 2 things we can do. Either you want to match the columns that you have above, so we could do this, and we would say row 2, call 2, something like that, right? So if we did that and we refreshed, now you can see that we have an equal number of columns on both rows. The other thing that we can do is, if you want this one row right here to span the whole bottom, you can give a attribute within the table data. It would be called call span equals, we'd say we want it to span 2 columns. Right? So now if we go back and we refresh this, now you can see that this entire row takes up the whole bottom part. It takes up call span 2. Okay. The same thing if we come up here and we say td call 3. And we come in here, and this time we say we want another column, but either we have to tell this row that we want it to span now 3 columns, or let's say we want this column here to take up this whole side. So vertically, we can come up here to this column we just created and we'll say row span equals 2, because we want it to span the 2 rows that are available. And we save that. Come in here and we hit Control R to refresh, and boom, you have that 3rd column now taking up 2 rows. So you kind of get the idea. Let's go ahead and do this again. We'll say tr, create a new row. We'll say td, and we'll say row 3, call 1, save. Again, we have this problem where it's only taking up one of the columns. So let's say we want this column 3 to span all 3 of these now. So we will change this to row span 3. And then this one here will have to be call span 2, right? Because we want it to span the 2 of them and bump up against that 3rd column. So if we refresh this now it's correct. We have these 2 rows that are taking up the 2 columns, and then we have this 3rd column that is taking up all 3 rows. Okay? So this is how you kind of move your cells around and have them take up different spaces. And this is how they used to align all of their content within a web page. Okay. So again, row span is how many rows you want the column that you just created to take up vertically. Call span is how many columns you want your row to span horizontally. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. The other thing I want to cover is, earlier, remember we put t-head in here up top. T-head encapsulates the header of a table, typically. A lot of times you'll see that people don't add the t-head and they don't add the t-body, but it is actually proper, I want to say, to have these elements. So in the t-head, we're going to do the same thing, tr, but instead of td, we'll do th. And th stands for table header cell, essentially. So we have the th there, and you'd want to have the same amount of ths as you have columns. Alright, so we can come in here and we'll say column 1, column 2, and column 3. We'll save that. So t-head, tr, and then your ths for the table headers, and let's see how different these are. See? So we now have these 3 columns, and they're titled column 1, column 2, column 3, as they're supposed to be. Now, if you add another column up here, or a table header that you don't have columns for, you're going to get that same look that we had before, to where you have a whole column with nothing inside of it beneath, right? So let's say we wanted column 3 to span into column 4, right? So we have the row span in there already. Just say call span equals 2. And boom, it's taken up 3 rows and 2 columns. Okay, so something I forgot to mention to you guys that we're actually going to cover now. I, even being the experienced coder I am, especially with HTML, I've made a mistake. I came in here and I put border 1 and width 400. Now, my defense to this is that tables are very old and I hardly ever use them anymore. But the W3C has removed or made this border attribute obsolete, and they have also made these width and actually height attributes obsolete as well. They want you to use CSS from now on. So I promise you in either the next video or the one after, we're going to go ahead and cover CSS to get it out of the way. We'll just give a basic overview of it so that you aren't dumbfounded when it comes to me using these inline styles that you might see, say, here, right? Style, margin 0, padding 0, box sizing, all that stuff, okay? So I'll cover that in a basic way to where you understand, but I don't want it to detract from your learning HTML. So let's do this. I'm going to go to up here into any search bar pretty much. With Chrome you can just type it in, and Edge I believe it'll take you to Bing. But this actually happens to be the new Edge, so it's going to take us to Bing. But we'll type W3C validator, hit enter. And it's going to be this first link here, most likely, the W3C Markup Validation Service. You can either validate HTML through a address, you can upload an HTML file, but the one that I like to use and what we're going to use now is direct input. So we're going to come back here to our code and we're going to select all with Control A. You can do Control C to copy, or you can right click, again, go copy, Control C. Come back in here to the direct input and hit Control V, or right click and hit paste. Alright, so we've pasted our HTML into there. Now we're going to hit this button check. And it's going to tell us right here that the width attribute on the table element is obsolete. Use CSS instead. I can follow this link probably, and it would probably explain this to me. But I actually know now what I'm supposed to be doing. It also says the same thing about the border attribute. The border attribute on the table element is obsolete. Okay, so let's come back into here, and we're going to remove these because they're not valid anymore. We're going to go ahead and do our style attribute. All right, style, and we're just going to say width 400 pixels. All right, and that's good for that. Now, this is called an inline style. All right, what I want to do is actually, I'm going to come up here, and you guys can follow along here, and I'll explain this, like I said, in the next video or two. We're going to go style, and yes, it has an end tag. And just go ahead and follow along with me here, and we're going to say table, and we're going to say TD. Do a open brace there with that squiggly brace there. Come down. And then we are going to say border, colon, 1 pixel, solid, black. And then end that off with a semicolon right there. Okay, and then above this, we're going to go ahead and do table and comma. Okay, so we save that. Now if we come back here to our table, aha, so here, one more little trick here. We're going to do a comma, and we'll say table, th, and hit save again, Control S, come back here, Control R for refresh, and boom, we have our border back. Isn't that lovely? Okay, so the joys of coding. So now if we hit Control A, again to highlight all, Control C, and we come into the HTML validator again in the input field, and we drop that in, and we check. There. Document checking completed, no errors or warnings to show. So this is valid HTML5. It used to be that you could get a cool little badge to put on your website that it's HTML5 validated, but they took that away. So that's the validator. You can pretty much drop any HTML that you want to create in your IDE into here to validate that it's good. So if you're having any issues, like your page isn't rendering the way you expect it to, try dropping it into the validation service to see if maybe it picks up some errors for you. I want to go ahead and point out here, this is an inline style. Okay, we could very well move this up here as well. So what we'd do is we'd come down another line, bring that over, and we just say table, and then here we just say width 400 pixels, end that off just like that. So we can pull this out, hit save, come back to our web page, and hit refresh, and there it is again. Alright, so that ends this video, and hope you guys have enjoyed it, and I hope you've learned something. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I would appreciate a like and a subscribe if you wouldn't mind. And I will also be providing a link in the description for a quiz regarding this tutorial. And again, I won't see the results. I won't know how well you did. You can take it as many times as you want. And yeah, enjoy. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks.